Hey guys, it's Danae, and thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of a Millennial Voice, the show. I have here with me Kim, the owner of Grant Boulevard. So I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna let her talk a little bit about what she does, her business, how she started it, and then we'll get into the show. So go ahead.
I'm so happy to be here. So I guess I should start with a thank you for welcoming me onto the show today.
Of
Um,
course.
hey, everybody. I am Dr. Kimberly McGlonn. I'm the founder, CEO, and creative director for Grant Boulevard. It's a Philadelphia-based sustainable startup, really interested in thinking about intersectional design, particularly centering the environment and issues of justice and justice reform. So we're using fashion as a way to do that kind of disruption right here in South Philly and in West Philly.
Right, right. And I also had the pleasure of visiting Kim yesterday for my own business, but I was able to see Grant Boulevard and it's so beautiful. It's amazing. And the first thing that I noticed upon going there is that you have this really amazing garage door that's like super cool. And it's not typically something you see often, especially not in Philly. So can you tell us how you acquired the space
Yeah,
and why you feel like it fits perfect for your brand?
absolutely. The space acquisition was really the coming together of energies that I wasn't anticipating and that I'm super grateful for. It was like knowing someone who knew someone who was willing to, act as a real ally. When we think about the barriers that Black business owners face, one of them is particularly in a country where our history is so saturated with stories of white folk kind of owning access to all forms of capital, including real estate.
Mhm.
Sometimes it requires for us, there are these ways that we can do these things on our own, but sometimes it just requires for us to have allies who are trying to figure out how to root for us.
Yeah.
And in that way, I had an ally. Shout out to Milton. I appreciate you. Who
Mhm.
was just like, I know someone. Maybe we could get you into this space. It's. And I was like, well, what? Tell me more. He was like, it's just a dirty kind of car garage right now. And I was just like, I like things that sit outside of like expected boundaries for how things are supposed to be. And this
Yeah.
was pre-pandemic, but I still like the idea of creating a space that felt like really, really welcoming to our community, which is so rich in diversity in all the ways. And so I
Right.
thought the idea of having something that could be inside, outside, and plays with this idea of reimagination, which is what our brand is really all about,
Mhm.
was a really nice alignment with our core values as a brand and as a creative team.
Right, right. And so you started Grant Boulevard in 2017, 2018, correct? Which year?
Yeah, 2017. I started, like we have these like ideations of like, what's the dream? And I started dreaming about design in 2016, started learning about mass incarceration as a longer, like crazy large set of complex institutions in 2016. And then in 2017, I was ready to kind of bring all of that together into something that, at least for me, felt cohesive. I think for some people, they were like, I don't understand what fashion design has to do with justice reform, and I don't understand what sustainability has to do with fashion. These are terms that are now kind of coming up in a lot more frequency in this
Mhm.
modern moment. But what was that, 4 years ago now? People weren't thinking about them in the same way. And so, yeah, we were ready. We were just stepping out. I was stepping out and then having to convince people that there was a different way maybe to think about building better things for the
Mhm.
future.
Right. So just going back to justice reform and sustainability, can you talk a little bit about how those two things tie into your brand?
Yeah, for sure. So when we think about how we design garments, right? We are an apparel company. We
Yeah.
think about how we design garments. For us, it's about thinking about how to reduce our footprint. And one of those ways is by thinking about reimagining things as a means for reducing waste and giving
Right.
garments that already exist a second, a third, a fourth life, where we see that there's still a lot of good right bones in a garment. So what we do and what we be kind of, I think what we're becoming known for is what I like to call the remix, which makes sense, right? We are Black women. We're a Black women owned company, led company. We come from traditions of jazz and rap and hip hop, all these musical traditions, gospel, that are
Right.
informed by taking things and remixing them. And we're just applying that to fashion and
Uh-huh.
just being really intentional about figuring out how can we use our company as a safe landing spot for folks who are formerly incarcerated
Yeah.
by partnering with the city and partnering with the state and partnering with nonprofits to just figure out how we can, just be really inclusive and really
Right.
intentional about inclusivity.
Right. And so, upon being there and also just talking to you, a lot of your, if not all of your clothes are non-gendered. There's like no gender binary there, which I really appreciate because, now we're moving the world in general is moving into a more inclusive space about like race, but also gender and sex and all these things. And so I was wondering, why was it important for you or why is it important for you to create garments that don't feel like they're for just men or just for women, especially because, you know, your brand is woman run and woman owned. So I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, whenever I think about the word, even the word woman, I always see it in my head with an X. Like that's the way and so I identify as a woman who is queer and Black and grew up Muslim and then, moved into Buddhism and Quakerism and now exploring. I mean, like my identity has evolved in so many ways, and it's always it's only happened because of my own notions of fluidity. And
Right.
that is where I found a sense of liberation as a person. And
Mm,
so because that's been my pathway to discovering full liberation, I see it as that's what I'd like to bring to everything that I do, is this space
right.
where other people can experience some fluidity. And
Yeah.
so, when we think about, for me, gender, the gender binary, and I think about fashion, what I think is more important and healthier is to allow people to wear garments that fit their mood, that fit their body as it changes. Our bodies don't always stay the same. That fits their, that fits just like their reality in any given moment. And I think when we're too prescriptive
Mm,
about who can wear what and when, we do everyone a disservice, because by trapping other people in our notions of gender, we by default trap ourselves. And so
yeah.
I think that, when I say I identify as a queer woman, I should be even more specific about what that means for me. It
Hmm.
means that sometimes I enjoy moving in ways that have been gendered male, like
Yeah.
taking up space, asserting myself, sitting with my legs open, using profanity. Like
Mhm.
there are all these ways in which our culture has empowered men to move in. The way that you drive, the way you use your hands, the way you use language. And for me, I don't want to be trapped by any notion of who I'm supposed to be along those lines. And
Mhm.
so and for me, there's a queerness in that I embrace and that I celebrate and that I love.
Yeah, yeah. So just going back to gendered clothing, actually, you know what? No, I want to talk about fashion, the fashion industry in general. So you're in an industry now that uh eh, fast fashion is the thing, you know, that's what the industry kind of goes to. And so for you, is it difficult to occupy a space that's kind of a lot different than what you're planning to do with that?
Um, yes and no, but mostly no. Like I think mostly, and I'm gonna say mostly no because I'm a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that to say that everything about the tradition that I come from is about having to figure out how to defy the lines that have been created and pushed upon me. And so
Yeah.
I'm trained for this. Like I'm
Right.
trained by my genes to be like, yeah, that's the construct, and this is what I see as problematic about it.
Mhm.
And so let's move around it. Let's move through it. Let's just keep fighting and breaking. And so right now, fashion is my front line.
Yeah.
And so the industry says like we're supposed to produce garments, a new launch every week. We're supposed to not pay attention to season. We're supposed to really force people to continue to not think about the exploitation of the workers who are designing the garments that we wear. And
Mhm.
and I think for me it's a principled position that we can do things slowly. We can do things in a way that really shows our regard for the planet, and we can do things in a way that actually pays people here a living wage. And so
Right.
as much as this is so, I have so much fun. Like I hope y'all, as you're listening, you hear the fun that I have in what we do and how we approach playing in this fashion space. But it's also, for me, it's an act of a revolution. It's an
Yeah.
act of rebellion, and that's what thought leadership is oftentimes about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so going back to like the non-gendered clothing, is that I hate asking that. I hate asking if things are difficult, but I'm just so curious
Oh,
because
good.
I'm not a fashion designer like by any regard. And so I'm wondering how easy or difficult is it for you to create clothing that everybody can feel that they can wear? Because I could see why it would be an easy thing because it might be a little bit less thought, but I can also see why it would be more thought put into it because you are trying to be inclusive.
Yes. And the harder thing actually is not even like the design of the garments. We're really interested in taking back things that were once gendered by men. So our Grant Boulevard Zero line is centered in that, like, taking garments that we didn't initially design, fabrics we didn't initially choose, and
Mhm.
then remixing them into something that feels really super fresh and fashion forward. And that takes a lot of like a lot of innovation and thoughtfulness and like consistently, right?
Yeah.
So when y'all come to the store on 36 in Lancaster, you're going to see how we do that. But I think the harder thing is convincing people that the way that they've been told to see and read garments is it's outdated, and that it doesn't actually empower them to choose what works for them and what draws them. Instead, it tells them that these are the things you can and can't have.
Yeah.
So it's like convincing men when they come in the store to be like, to show them like, no, this is reimagined menswear.
Yeah.
Like, look at the color story, look at the fit, get a sense of, does that speak to you? And then center your decision as a consumer, as a shopper, and what feels good for you, and less of like, what you think people are going to read into what your choice is. You know what I mean? Like, empower them to just like rebel themselves.
Yeah. So so you would say that it's more difficult for men to kind of get along with it than for women?
I think so. I definitely think so. And I think part of it is like, women have been conditioned to think about color much more, even just color, much more broadly than men have been conditioned to think about color. And that's changing. I have men who come in who will buy like a pair of sweet pink joggers, or men who will come in and buy something in a really nice shade of lavender. And I think that there's some shift happening there. And I'm hoping that as we continue to play with models, that there's more of a sense that you can be deeply entrenched in like a really rich sense of masculinity as you define it, and still be okay wearing lace.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that you create everything locally. All the clothes and garments that you make are made in the Philadelphia area. So what does it feel like for you to be a part of that locally grown community?
Um, it's certainly a point of pride for a lot of different reasons. I mean, and the two main ones are that, when you make things locally, like truly make things locally, you reduce your carbon footprint. Like there's something to said about the fact that, in transporting things back and forth from our storefront to our studio, we're moving less than 1.2 miles. So, there's something really nice about that, closing that loop. I think the other thing that I really, really appreciate about our approach is that, we're not trafficking in the same kind of rebellion that we as the Black folks have had to figure out how to overcome, which is ultimately gross exploitation. When we buy garments from the mall and we're spending $5 or $7 or $10, which, don't get me wrong, like, I recognize that particularly in a pandemic, our dollars are limited and we have to be really careful and our budgets are tighter, and that's real. But at the same time, I really hope that we move towards buying higher quality things that are made locally, where we know people are paid a fair wage, because that's the only way we can break up with the cycle of slavery that's ultimately been exploited to Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's just that. So if we are really a people, Latinx people, Native people, Black people, who recognize the ways in which our current circumstance have been so informed by, a capitalist colonialist drive to just juice us and not honor us and not pay us well and not care about our air and our water and our soil, we have to break up with being okay with people in Turkey, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in China being exploited in essentially very similar ways.
Yeah.
And there's a reason we don't know that, but I'm telling y'all, that is all the way real.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, you're so knowledgeable just about like being sustainable and about reform, and that's super admirable to me. But I'm wondering, like, where does your education come from? And also, like, I know, because I know the story of Grant Boulevard. I feel like I should have asked that first, and I didn't, because I already know about it. So I'm gonna let you tell everybody kind of how Grant Boulevard the name ties into your store, but also the education and the understanding that you have of marginalized groups and things like that, how they all tie in together to make your store what it is.
You ask the best questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let's see. So, okay. So I have a PhD in design, but it's in curriculum design. And so, getting that PhD, I think I got my PhD when I wrapped it up when I was about 28. So I started that when I was about 23, I guess. Yeah, I started my PhD when I was 23. And I think that, that process is it's like really lonely, particularly when you're Black, because, my parents started college, but they didn't finish. I didn't know anyone that had a PhD when I started it. I didn't know anyone that was Black and had a PhD when I finished it. So I started that journey really figuring out, like, what do I want to learn about? What do I want to become an expert in? And so much of the PhD, once you finish your grad classes, is really about, self-reliance and
Mm.
self-sufficiency. And I think that those are skills that have always been with me like my whole life. And I just leverage that thinking about design in curriculum, like, who do we teach and why do we teach it and when do we teach it and who teaches, to just applying that to fashion. And so
Right.
when I came to fashion, it wasn't that I even actually was like I had automatically fallen in love with fashion. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've always been stylish. So let me
Yeah.
just put that out there. I've been stylish. But for me, it was like I wanted to create jobs for folks who are formerly incarcerated because I had this longer personal story of understanding how hard it is to survive when you're poor. And
Yeah.
that's because of my experience on Grant Boulevard. So for most of my life, my parents were solidly middle. No, I take that back. Not most of my life. For the first 12 years of my life, my parents were solidly middle class. Like they met in college at Marquette, they fell in love, like super, really, really, really rich, beautiful love story.
Yeah.
And they, because they worked at the post office, they were able to buy a house on Grand Boulevard. And then when I was about 12, my mother, she got really sick, and she had a really a struggle, with her emotions and her mental
Yeah.
health. She left us. And my dad, who was trying to navigate his thing and his emotional well-being, he fell into a really long period of drug addiction. And
Mm.
so, since 14 on, I've been on my own navigating how to take care of myself. And it's made me have to think about, be exposed to, consider things that have been deemed criminal, like sex work,
Yeah.
like, spending a time with people who are selling drugs, who are using drugs, a lot of things that people go to jail for. And I know a lot of people who have gotten caught and gone to jail for those things. And I recognize that that's not all that they are. That's a piece of what they've had to figure out how to navigate. And
Mm.
so, yeah, like that fullness of like understanding that struggle on a personal level,
Yeah.
just changed my understanding of what the problems are and like what
Yeah.
the struggles are and like who's responsible, and recognizing that there just has to be something better.
Right, right. So you have sustainability, you
Yep.
have reform, you
Yep.
have inclusion,
Yep.
and it's just like you're checking all these boxes. And so I'm wondering if there really is anything next that you're trying to kind of add to your brand that makes it more inclusive, if that's even possible at this point, because I feel like you have race, you have you just have everything. So I'm wondering like what the next steps are for you.
The next steps are, like launching ever more forward thinking conversations about notions of circularity, which
Hmm.
is the idea that even when we're thinking about being sustainable, there's always new ways of doing better, right? Of like reducing waste in like our pattern making, reducing waste and like engaging our customers and people in our community to bring back things that they love, but they want to see maybe done a take on in a different way,
Yeah.
instead of like, like, so encouraging people and teaching people in another way. That's something that, right now my schedule is so full. I'm actually not always able to do what I'm best at, which is actually teaching.
Hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to being able to excel as a teacher in my brand leadership. So that's something that I'm really going to figure out how to put more front and center.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm really looking forward to, we're doubling the size of our studio space. So just growth in general, so that's a new big thing for us in the next several weeks. We'll be doubling the size of our studio space and hiring more people and diversifying our team in even more ways. So that's that, and new partnerships. We have a new partnership now with the city of Philadelphia and their work release program. So, figuring out how that's going to look during COVID and how that's going to look after COVID. So just continuing the push to figure out how we can do what we say we're going to do better.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this is also beautiful to hear. You don't typically hear one, you're a sustainable store and you use repurposed clothing, which is super rare. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really see too many people doing that. I know you like go to thrift stores and you use like these secondhand things and you kind of like repurpose them. And just being able to be in your store yesterday and seeing what they look like, you wouldn't even be able to tell that they are repurposed, which I think that some people who think about thrift shopping or think about repurposed clothing, they might be a little like, iffy about purchasing those things because it feels worn. But what I appreciate about your store is that it does not feel that way. And I think that because of that, brings those customers in. And then it's like, oh, this is, reused. This has been used before. So I definitely really appreciate that about your brand. And again, just like seeing the work that you're doing, as a person who would like to be more sustainable and who's like actively working. And I know a lot of people are kind of in that space right now. And so my hope is that, more people will take on your method, and kind of start doing the same thing. And we can kind of get away from the fast fashion, component to fashion, because it doesn't need to be that way.
No, absolutely. And I thank you for acknowledging that the craft of my team, that we're a
Yes.
team now of 7 makers who are all deeply, richly talented designers and seamstresses. So,
Yeah.
and that's part of, I think, of what the magic of what we do is that we're not novices, like there's a really deep skill set in the team.
Mhm.
So, we can take these things that already exist and breathe second life into them, but we can also play from like, bulk fabric. So, one thing we played with is like, how can we use fabric overages to create new garments? How can we play with cottons that are grown organically and what that means in
Mm.
ways that show that, that we're cooking with some serious sauce. This
Yeah.
yes, this is thoughtful design, but I don't want anybody to get it twisted. The design that we are aesthetically, when it comes to like the sheer sharpness of how we approach design in fashion, I don't think I think we're on par with anything you'd find at Nordstrom's or anything you'd find at Saks, or
Yeah.
Barney's. If
Yeah.
we haven't gotten that level of validation, to the extent that we need these large brands to validate that the work that we do is beautiful and has merit. But like every time when Vogue comes out with a new issue or Harper's Bazaar comes out with a new issue, I always think like I really believe it's just a matter of time
Yeah.
because just of the depth of how we approach creativity and innovation in the design space.
Right, right. And so my next and final question to you, one, after I left your studio, I saw you on the news, which was super cool on 6ABC. I think it
Oh,
was
that's
like,
awesome.
yeah, what was it? What is it? The feature, Black something?
I didn't see it.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I was like, "Mom, come here!" Like she's on the. But so that was super cool to see, and they talked about how you were featured in the Be Good, the Be Good list, and that's all like sustainable.
No,
No.
no one. So what happened was Beyonce partnered with the NAACP
Uh
to
huh.
figure out how they could develop a fund to support Black-owned businesses. And thousands of people, I mean, of course, thousands of people applied. And we were the only brand in Philly that got the money, only
Wow.
company in Philly that got the money. And we were the only company thinking about sustainability that got the money.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's interesting validation that, that if we tell the story of what we're doing in a way that makes sense, like that goes back into me stepping into my real ability to teach. If I can teach people through fashion that, like that there's another way, and that Black women are already leading that way, and there are a host of Black women who I stand in company with who
Yeah.
are really being intentional about trying to change that conversation, that, and if we can, get the general public to believe in us and to really commit to be like, no, I'm not going to Old Navy first. I'm
Right.
going to be intentional about knowing what I need to shop, and I'm going to center my dollars
Mm.
in my neighborhood or in a different neighborhood with the vision of Black women and a
Yeah.
women-led team. Then I mean, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. And I think something, the not the most important thing, but one of the most important things to me about your story and how everything's kind of come to fruition is the authenticity behind it. Because, Grant Boulevard is still relatively new, but you're getting this recognition, the recognition that you deserve. And I think because there's like a super authentic component to it, down to the name and what it means to you and how that ties into your story, but also the story of the brand and the people that you employ and the things that you want to do with it. I think that because of that, that energy is there. I feel like that's why it's become what it's become. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it like continues to grow and expand. And you're getting another studio and you're looking to hire more people and just do a whole bunch of different things. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's coming of that. But that was the last thing I had for you. Was there anything that I didn't include that you might have wanted to touch on, to talk about?
Thank you for creating that space.
Of course.
I think the last thing is I want to let everybody know that, like I am so excited about our next collection. Like we have a new collection that's dropping in maybe in 6 weeks, hopefully. And it's a beautiful celebration and commemoration of the experiences of Black folk and Native folk and Latinx folk, and a story of liberation. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to have everyone join us on this journey and to just be a witness to the kind of art that we're creating and the beauty of the story that we're telling through fashion, and the hopefully the lighthouse that we're creating for you to be a party to, about just a better way of doing everything, just a
Yeah.
better way of doing everything. And I'm so excited to
Yeah.
to see like the have the shoot come together, and the story we're going to tell through the amazingly talented models and photographers that we're going to have
Yeah.
behind the scenes, to
Yeah.
really to give y'all something that is going to be hopefully just a really remarkable, romantic, inspiring story.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on my show. It's been such an honor to talk to you 2 days in a row now. I feel like I know your life, um, which is super dope. But yeah, again, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to see what you have going on. And actually, last thing, can you tell people where to find you on social media?
I will gladly do that. And thank you. I was just thinking that, and I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, how do we work this in?
Yeah.
Um, yes, y'all. You can shop us online at www.grantboulevard, that's blvd.com. You can visit us in person at 3605 Lancaster Avenue, right in Powelton Village section of University City. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Grant Boulevard, and follow us on Twitter at We Are Grant Boulevard. So welcome to the team.
Yes, beautiful. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. You guys heard her, follow her, support her, check her out if you're in the Philly area, which I know a lot of you are. She told you guys her address, so make sure you're stopping through and checking out the website. But that's all for us today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Millennial Voice, the show, here with the Philadelphia Sunday Sun. Also, as always, make sure you guys are checking us out at www.philasun.com to read our articles, which I write in weekly. You guys can purchase a year's worth of I can't get my words together. You guys can purchase a year's worth of papers for only $40 a year. And make sure you guys are tuning into this show every Sunday. Again, Kim, thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.